for me, the main catalyst in terms of what happened to Maddie is Jenn sending Maddie upstairs to sleep with Stephan. And I can't help thinking that despite Jenn's many excuses, that this was something that was extremely normal for her. She actually had no objections with allowing the pair of them to sleep together or be together unsupervised. And we know that from when one of the roommates mentioned that she saw them together in Stephan's room when Jenn was away, and she messaged Jenn about it, and Jenn said, "You're good," essentially brushing it off. She wasn't bothered by the pair of them being alone in Stephan's room. Now, I actually think that there's a lot of things that we've missed with regards to this notion of Jenn allowing Maddie sleeping upstairs, simply out of shock for the fact that a mother would actually allow this to happen. And I think we've landed on the part of it where just this utter selfishness of her saying, "I needed a good night's sleep, so I sent Maddie upstairs to sleep with Stephan." And I want to unpack it some more, because I actually think that's just a load of BS, and that this is just a normal thing, and that the difference here is that Jenn knows that she's under scrutiny. And what do you do when you're under scrutiny, when you're as manipulative as she is? You come up with a story that's going to make you look less guilty. And in her mind, she looks less guilty by saying, "I need a good night's sleep," as opposed to, "Well, I just let them. It was just normal, so I didn't see any problem with it." Because obviously that is going to land her in even more trouble. But as we unpack this, you'll see that there's actually a major inconsistency here, which one of the detectives did touch on, but I don't think he pushed hard enough on this. I don't think Jenn actually understood what he was getting at when he pushed her on it. But we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. So let's listen to these excerpts in consecutive order and have a look at how the narrative actually does change. Because while we can say, yes, at the base of all this is Jenn sending Maddie upstairs so she could get a good night's sleep, there's actually more to it when you really break it down. So let's just jump in.
So you last saw her Sunday night about what time?
I would say 11 p.m. before she went to bed.
And you were here at home?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And where did she go to bed? Was she in her room, your room, or something else?
She actually slept upstairs with... we have a guest bedroom. We were all going to sleep together in the same bed, but I needed some good sleep. And I got a new job recently. I haven't been well rested. I needed some sleep. So I asked, "Hey, can you guys go to the guest bedroom upstairs?"
Mm-hmm.
I knew he was going to get her ready and...
Sorry. Okay, so you needed some good sleep. So was it about 11 o'clock?
Yeah. I sent them upstairs and I went to bed.
So the first thing I noticed when I listened to Jenn here was that her excuse was she had a new job, and because of her new job, she was not well rested and needed sleep. What's missing from that narrative? her story about forgetting her meds. This time round, she's telling us she was just tired. She wanted a decent night's sleep. There was no extra circumstances that were having a dire effect on her condition. It was just she wanted to get a decent night's sleep, so she didn't want them in the bed with her. No thought here, no comment here about her medications. And when you listen to the later interviews, she makes it sound like that was the major thing, that was at the forefront of her mind, that it was so traumatic for her almost, that she had to have this sleep without them so she could catch up because of the issues with her medications. And yet, the first version of the story, not one mention of the medications. To me, that says that's definitely a fabrication. Because you will hear as we go on the way she makes it sound so very important in later interviews. The fact that it isn't mentioned at first says to me, well, obvious it wasn't important, because it would be at the forefront of her mind. So straight away, I'm going to say that the missed medications is an invention by Jenn, after realising that this story that she's come up with wasn't enough.
So, one thing that I think I may have misheard you say earlier, but I want to make sure that I have it absolutely clear, is on Sunday night, y'all went to bed around 11, and the reason that you sent her upstairs with Stephan was because you had work in the morning, was it? Or you just started a new job?
I just started a new job and I haven't been sleeping well.
Oh.
I take psychiatric meds every night for my bipolar disorder, and if I don't take them the right way, eat, and go to sleep on time,
They don't work.
They don't work. Gotcha. So I was just like, hey, I really need these meds, because I forgot them the night before. I forgot them, I think, Saturday night. So Sunday I was not myself. So I asked, I'm like, hey, I need to be medicated. I need to sleep. Can you take care of the morning duties so I can go and sleep?
Gotcha. All right. No, I just wanted to make sure I understood you right, because I was like, did you have work in the morning? Or I didn't write that down, and I wanted to make sure I heard you okay.
So he has prompted her by saying, I may have misheard. And when someone says to you, I may have misheard, the inference there is that what you've said is something that to them is something they disagree with, or something that perhaps ethically is wrong. So what you've probably noticed in all these interviews that Jenn does is that she, people can say that she's thick as two bricks, but she picks up on cues from the interviewers really well. She picks up on the verbal cues and the body language cues. And his verbal cue here was, you need a better excuse than just you wanted to get a good night's sleep for sending your daughter upstairs to sleep with this man, because it's not acceptable for her to sleep with this man. That's what Jenn has interpreted from him saying, I may have misheard. So Jenn goes into she agrees with him, yes, I've got the new job, I'm not sleeping well. And then she introduces her meds for the first time here. But I think she's processing as she's telling the story. Because, first of all, she says, well, I have these meds, and if I don't take them the right way, eat and go to sleep on time, they don't work properly. Then the story changes again. So initially she's saying, well, I just wanted to get a good night's sleep. I wanted to make sure that I was getting to sleep on time because of my meds. And then I think she's processed some more. and thought, hang on, no, he's told me that this is not a good thing for me to allow her upstairs with him. So then she's said, actually, I forgot them, I think, on the Saturday. She's not saying she definitely forgot them on the Saturday. When you say I think, obviously there's uncertainty there. And I think in this instance, where she's saying I forgot them, I think, it's giving her an out. Because then she's not really lying, because she's not being definitive. Yes, I definitely forgot them. It's more like, okay, I need to take this story up a notch, because right now I'm being judged for allowing my daughter to sleep with this predator without a really good reason. I think this is what I'm going to say. So it comes out as, I forgot to take them, I think. So she's working on her narrative as she goes, which again says to me that this story about forgetting her meds is an invention. This is her trying to be a little bit more convincing, a little less culpable, because she doesn't want to say, well, it's just normal, I would just allow them to sleep together. I really couldn't be bothered, I didn't care. Because obviously that would have her locked up pretty damn quick. Like I said, Jenn is actually quite manipulative. She's not, yeah, we can call her the soda potato, but that's more because she's lazy. But in terms of manipulation, she knows how to read people, she knows how to manipulate, and she does it quite skillfully. I think her and Stephan were perfectly matched and were both equally manipulative. She can complain about Stephan, but when you listen to the things she says about Stephan, I think she has simply allowed him to manipulate her because it has suited her needs. I think she's the kind of person who is so manipulative that if it didn't suit her needs, she would not have allowed him to manipulate her. So I think what we're getting here is her trying to be manipulative in what she was saying, because she doesn't want to be charged for neglect, for basically sending her daughter upstairs with this predator.
I understand you have a new job.
Yes.
Okay, and if I say anything that's incorrect, please correct me, okay? You have a new job, and last night you asked them to go sleep upstairs because you wanted to get rest. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What time was this? Do you remember?
Can we just acknowledge how brilliant Myra Tagler is? She is controlling this interview 100%. Jenn was ready to go off on her usual spiel, and Myra cut her off. So she basically asked her, it's my understanding that you sent them upstairs to sleep together. Jenn was going to come out with the excuses, and Myra cut her off and moved the conversation on. So at this point in the interview, Jenn hasn't been given the opportunity to give her excuses, but Myra does come back to talking about this part of what happened. So let's look at that.
Well, I'm sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. You send them upstairs, right?
Mhm.
How many bedrooms are upstairs?
3.
Okay. Where?
In bedroom number 4.
Okay. And what about Stephan?
Bedroom number 4.
Okay. Is it normal for both of them to sleep in the same room?
Sometimes, when I really need a good night's sleep, I will send them upstairs. But when also a lot of times we will sleep together in the king size bed, all three of us, or sometimes Stephan will go upstairs and in our bed alone. So it just really depends on what's going on that night with our schedules and what we're doing.
Okay, where were you sleeping?
Downstairs in the king size bed.
Okay.
So I've noticed that Myra does a really good job of disrupting the flow of the story. So Jen's got this whole narrative memorised. But Myra keeps basically butting in and interrupting and screwing up Jen's story. And then she'll come back to those things, but direct them with questions. So she says to Jenn, is it normal, after establishing that they were both together in room 4, she then asks Jenn, is it normal for both of them to sleep together? Being very clear that she's talking about them sleeping together upstairs in room 4. And Jenn says, sometimes when I need a good night's sleep. She hasn't had a chance to get back into talking about the meds. And I think that Myra is making it very hard for her to come up with her extra excuses. But what's key here is that Myra has asked her if it is normal for the pair of them to sleep together in that room. And Jenn has said sometimes, basically saying sometimes they do sleep together in that room, which is essentially saying that it is normal. She's essentially saying it might not happen every night, but yeah, it does sometimes happen. And she's perfectly fine with it. She then starts talking about schedules. And it's all about who's doing what, and sometimes it's convenient for her because then when she needs a good night's sleep, it's convenient for her for them to sleep upstairs. So she hasn't had a chance to wind herself up and give the meds narrative here. But what she has done, what Myra has so skillfully done, is got her to admit that it is actually normal for Maddie and Stephan to sleep together. Jenn has essentially said, yeah, it's normal when Jenn wants to get a decent night's sleep. When she needs to put Jenn first, she's going to send them upstairs. And the brilliant thing is here that Myra's way of interviewing Jenn meant that Jenn never had the opportunity to introduce the notion of her needing to take her meds. That is not mentioned once in this interview with Myra Tagler, because she cuts her off and ruins the flow of what Jenn was trying to say and gives her very, very direct questions, which Jenn basically falls into answering without being able to continue her narrative.
Now, the dynamic between you three. I know you told me that sometimes you and her would sleep in the bed.
Yeah.
Sometimes the three of you would sleep in the bed. And then sometimes you would send him and her to a bedroom so you could get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
How long has that been going on?
Okay, so I'm going to say back in June. It was primarily the three of us sleeping in bed together all the time.
And why? How did that start?
Maddie has always slept in the bed with me. She's always slept in my room. Only when we lived in that apartment in Northport did she have her own bedroom, and we could afford for her to have her own room.
So that was the only time she's actually had her own room. Here, she's always shared a room with me. When she was a baby, she had her own bedroom here for a few years. But once she got older and we started having roommates and all that stuff, she started just staying with me in my bedroom. Stephan, well, during the times that we did live with Stephan, it would be the three of us in this bed down here, down in the master bedroom. It wasn't until June of last year that we had broken up, and I said, okay, I don't want to sleep in the same bed with you. Please move upstairs. Mm-hmm. And he moved upstairs. At this point, Maddie pretty much slept with me all the time. I think I can count maybe on one hand how many times she's gone upstairs to sleep with him alone, because I wasn't comfortable with it. I was like, no, this it doesn't look right, like it just doesn't seem right, like I'm not comfortable with it. Maddie, you gotta sleep with me. And I've told him that. But there were times that they begged for sleepovers, like, please, we just want to stay up late watching movies. And I would be too tired to stay up late, so I would say, fine, go ahead and do it. But just this once, like...
When did you start becoming comfortable with it?
I don't know if I was ever comfortable with it.
But you told them to go Sunday night to go sleep together.
I did. That was a selfish move on my part. It's because I wanted a good night's sleep. I didn't want her kicking me or rolling into me or waking me up, or to hear her alarm so that it woke me up. I wanted to keep sleeping until I needed to sleep, because I just had not, with my training schedule, I have not had a good night's sleep. My medication was out of whack. I was feeling funny and not like myself, and I knew that I needed another night's sleep and my medication in my body like ASAP, so I needed to go to bed. So I wasn't even comfortable sending her that night, but I just did it for my own selfish reasons.
Okay.
Now you've got the opposite strategy happening here. He's just basically let her talk. He hasn't interrupted her, he's just let her yaffle on. So, he asks her, first of all, how long has this been going on, Maddie sleeping upstairs with Stephan? And she doesn't give a definitive answer. She goes back to, she doesn't say since June. She starts talking about sending Stephan upstairs in June. But she doesn't outright say that that's when it began. Jenn is very good at not giving direct answers to questions and skirting around the answers in a way that makes it look like she is answering when actually she isn't. So she comes out with June. She doesn't say since June. She comes out with June and then clarifies what she's saying here, that that's when she sent Stephan upstairs to sleep on his own. Now, for all we know, given that she's already given us this narrative about how when she needs sleep she sends them upstairs, just because she sent Stephan upstairs in June doesn't mean she wasn't previously sending the pair of them off to sleep alone before that. Because she hasn't said that's when it started. All she said is June is when she sent him upstairs. But she doesn't even say it like definitely like that. She says, I'm going to say back in June. And then goes on with the, I didn't want to sleep with him anymore. Jenn is very good at being vague. She thinks. She's not sure. Never a definite answer for anything. So he also wants to know why she allowed it to start happening. And she just goes off on this long spiel that you can tell she's trying to avoid giving the answer. And I think in her mind, if she goes on long enough, they're going to forget that they were asking her a question and she won't have to give the answer. So, in response to the question of why, she does this whole blah 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 thing of how when they lived here, Maddie had her own room, but then when they lived here, Maddie never had her own room, and she usually sleeps with me all the time, yada yada yada. She's spending ages avoiding answering the question. And then she tries to say that she was never comfortable with the setup. Why is that so ridiculous? Because until now, her reasoning for sending Maddie and Stephan upstairs is because it was her choice to do so she could get a decent night's sleep. But then suddenly she decides to introduce this notion of sleepovers. So suddenly it's no longer her fault. She's shifting the blame to Maddie and Stephan, because she's realising from all this questioning that her answers aren't acceptable, and that at the end of the day she's still telling them that she was okay with Maddie sleeping with Stephan. And she realises that's not the correct answer. That's going to get Jenn into trouble. And what is priority number one with Jenn? Priority number one is to protect Jenn. Priority number two is to protect Stearns. Then Maddie, I don't even know if she even rates a mention here. But certainly the priority here is to protect Jenn. Like I said in yesterday's video, Jenn likes to give the impression of being the perfect mother. So she has to preface this whole sleepover thing by saying that she was not comfortable with it. She was never comfortable with it. And she says, I can count it on one hand the number of times that they've had these sleepovers. Interesting, because later on she says 2 hands. And we know that right now here she's trying to backpedal. She is trying to make it sound like it's not nearly as bad as what it is. So even when she starts with on one hand, I know it's going to be way more than that, because right now everything she's saying here is designed to make her look like she's not culpable. No longer is it about her needing to get a good night's sleep. It's about them wanting to have sleepovers together. Suddenly we've got this notion being introduced of them wanting to sleep together so they can watch a movie together, and she's tired, so she's like, I've allowed it just this once.
Yeah, so I was very vigilant for the first few years of how he would interact with her and what he would do, and I would question if anything was weird, but nothing ever was truly weird. I was just like, okay. I even had a rule for the longest time, for sleepovers with him, as in if he were to sleep in the guest bedroom upstairs, and I would say, no, you guys can hang out and do whatever, but you're sleeping with me.
Understandable.
Just because even if I've known him for 7 years, the idea of course it would weird anyone out, a little girl sleeping with a man that's not her dad. It sounds weird.
Okay, there's actually a lot to unpack here. So There's more to this clip, and I'll play that next, but I wanted to stop it here and unpack what's already been said. So again, she's trying to use these words to persuade the detectives that she's a good mum. She was vigilant. Well, we know she was not vigilant. And then she says that she was watching for anything weird. And she says, but there was never anything truly weird. She's not saying there wasn't anything at all that was weird, but there was never anything that she would go to the extent of saying it was truly weird. It was just kind of weird. Meaning that she was aware that things weren't right. Otherwise, why insert the word truly? If something is truly weird, then you're saying there's no doubt about it. It was definitely weird. But by saying there was never anything truly weird, to me, is her inferring that it was a little bit weird, but I can find a way to excuse it, basically. So for me, that's a huge red flag. Now, she talks about this rule, and I've mentioned this before. She talks about her rule of having no sleepovers for the longest time. She's had this rule for the longest time. Okay, but apparently she only sent him upstairs in June. That on its own, saying that she's had this rule for the longest time, definitely suggests that this has been happening for the longest time. This has been happening long before she sent him upstairs and said, you're not allowed to share my bed anymore. And she actually confirms this. And I actually had missed this before. But when you break down what she says after this, she says, talking about the sleepovers, and says, if he was going to sleep in the guest bedroom upstairs, meaning that before she threw him out of her room, there were times when he was going upstairs to sleep in the guest bedroom. And she claims that she had said to Maddie that on those occasions when Stephan went upstairs to sleep in the guest bedroom, that she'd said to Maddie, no, you're sleeping with me. There is definitely the implication of basically before, when the three of them would normally sleep in a bed together, there were times when he would go upstairs to sleep in the guest bedroom and would have Maddie go upstairs to sleep with him. So her saying that this began in June is complete utter BS. She has just, two statements here have shown us that it is something that has been a long-term thing. She's had this rule for the longest time. Well, given that he moved out 6 months after moving upstairs, you can't say 6 months is the longest time. When you're talking about the longest time, you're talking about much longer time frames than that. And then for her to specifically say the times when he went upstairs to sleep, she's not talking about after he moved upstairs to sleep. She's talking about instances when they were all still downstairs together and Stephan has gone upstairs to the guest bedroom to sleep. And she even referred to it as the guest bedroom, not Stephan's bedroom. She's basically admitting here that even before she kicked Stephan out of her room downstairs, she was allowing the pair of them to go upstairs together and sleep together in that room. This woman really does need to be prosecuted. And then we're on to what, this is about the fourth interview, and she realises that they're not buying her soggy bread. She's trying her best to sell it. She's trying all sorts of ways to sell this. She's introduced this whole notion now of the sleepovers. And because she is reading their reactions and their body languages, she knows that they're still not buying this story. So she actually says, a little girl sleeping with a man who's not her dad is weird. A little girl. Well, Maddie wasn't a little girl anymore. So she is once again telling us this has been a long-term thing. This is not just her allowing them to sleep together in that last 6 months that he was staying there. She is saying this was happening even when Maddie was a little girl. I would never ever refer to a 12-year-old as a little girl. And I think it seems pretty clear here that while she is trying to give the impression here that she understood that it was wrong and that she disapproved, at the same time she basically is telling them that this has been a long-term thing. This has been happening for a very, very, very long time, since Maddie was a little girl.
But so I haven't I trusted him enough to even to let that even happen that night, you know?
Yeah. I mean, is it common? Because I know you said you would never let him in the past, but is it common to let her sleep up with him or let them spend a lot of time alone together?
I think I'm gonna say I've let them sleep together less than what I can count on these two hands.
Okay.
Not much. But a lot of the times it was just the three of us sleeping together in my bed too.
So Jenn has become more and more aware, obviously, that this is a bad thing and that she should not have, in the first place, mentioned the fact that these two had been sleeping together upstairs. Although, still, for her to be innocent in this whole situation, she still needs to be able to place them upstairs away from her for when this happened. But she comes out with this line of, I trusted him enough to let it happen. Which we know is complete utter BS. Because in other interviews, she's like, well, I learnt not to trust the man. And I didn't always fully trust him. So she's totally contradicting herself. We know that this is just BS. She's saying this to make herself seem less culpable. Because if she just admits that it was just standard procedure, I never questioned it, I just let it happen, then that's going to make it so much easier to prosecute her. But he asks her, is it common? And she doesn't give a direct answer. Jenn is really good at avoiding direct answers. Once again, you get this really long spiel from her. She doesn't say, no, it's not common. Instead, she's like, I think, I'm going to say, neither of these are definitive answers. Here she's avoiding giving an answer. She doesn't want to be conclusive in what she says, so instead she comes out with, I think, I'm going to say. And then, having previously said I can count on one hand how many times this has happened, now she's gone, I can count on two hands the number of times this has occurred. Well, to me, that's significant. Even if we were to believe that this has only occurred in a 6-month period, we're into double digits suddenly. And she's saying that in a 6 month period, she's allowed them to sleep together 10 times at least. Because let's be real, if she's saying she can count on two hands, she's definitely underestimating here. When people are basically trying to back out of something where they know they're in the wrong, they try to minimise the situation. So she's trying to minimise it by saying she can count on two hands. To me, that says it's happened way more than that. And let's call a spade a spade. She has already admitted, as noted in some of the previous clips, that this has been an ongoing thing since before he moved upstairs. She specifically talks about him going upstairs to sleep on the occasions when he went upstairs to sleep in the guest bedroom. Not after he moved upstairs, but on occasions when he went up there to sleep up there. So she's admitted this has been a long-term thing. So is it common? I think it was quite common. But she doesn't want to admit that outright.
I got home around 10:30. I started getting ready for bed myself. I started eating and taking my meds because I have to take meds. When I went to take my meds, I realized, oh my god, I forgot to take my Saturday night's meds, which is why I felt so weird and so abnormal and not myself Sunday while I was at work. Everyone at work noticed I was acting different and not being myself. Like I couldn't smile in front of the guests. I felt this wave of depression that I haven't felt in years. It was my bipolar symptoms coming up again that I've been medicating myself for all this time. I realized I forgot to take my meds and I said, you guys, I need a good night's sleep. I need to take my meds. I sent them to sleep upstairs in the guest bedroom so that I could get a good night's sleep. Suggested that we all sleep together in the same bed together, but not the easiest person to sleep with. She rolls around, she punches, she kicks. We have a king size bed and she typically sleeps on one side and she'll end up on my side when we wake up.
Okay.
So I asked her, I'm like, no, please, I need a good night's sleep. If you guys can go upstairs and let me sleep.
So you can see here that once again she's escalating the narrative. Now it's not just about, well, I forgot my meds and I needed to make sure I took them and ate and yada yada. Now it's this huge drama. She went to take them and oh my gosh, I realised that I forgot to take them. And she's using words like that she was feeling weird and abnormal. And she's saying that people at work noticed that she just wasn't her normal self. And she's giving this picture of her going down into this deep abyss because she missed one dose of medication. I'm curious as to how much of an effect missing one dose of her medication would actually have, because now I don't know a lot about medications for bipolar, but a lot of these medications that are for dealing with these kind of mental health issues, especially for depression, are cumulative. So if you start on antidepressants, it's going to take 3 to 6 months for them to kind of level out and for your brain to start getting like the right levels of serotonin and stuff like that. And I would imagine that bipolar medication acts the same way. So missing one tablet may make you feel a little bit out of it, a little bit off perhaps, but I don't think it's going to plunge you back into this deep abyss of complete utter depression, I think you would actually have to miss tablets for a few days to really notice a difference. The other thing is, like I said, she only introduces this notion of her having missed her medications later on to escalate the narrative. But here's the thing, anyone who is familiar with any type of medication for helping you sleep will know that you're going to know by 1 o'clock in the morning that you haven't taken your meds because you're going to be wide awake. So for her to say that she didn't realise till 24 hours later that she didn't take her meds is not very convincing to me at all, because she would have realised partway through the night on the Saturday night that she didn't take her meds because she would have been wide awake and unable to sleep. At which point in time, yeah, she may have made a choice not to take her sleeping meds because they may have prevented her from waking up on time, but she may have then chosen to take her bipolar meds so that she was still on track with her meds. So many things here to me point to the fact that this is simply her escalating the story because she realises they're not buying her soggy bread. So she's got to add these additional elements to her story. So now, not only has she forgotten to take her meds, but now it's just a dire thing for her. Whereas previously it was more a case of, yeah, I forgot my meds, so I want to take my meds and make sure I've got a good night's sleep. Now it's suddenly almost a matter of life or death for poor Jenn. I don't buy it. All I'm seeing here is an escalation of the story to try and make her look less culpable.
So the living situation with them, I'll be honest, seems weird. It's weird to me. She's got a bedroom downstairs. What's kind of the mindset or the thought process, the communication you've had with Stephan about, you know, she's not going to sleep in her bed, but you guys are going to go sleep in the guest bedroom?
So originally the plan was that all three of us were going to sleep in my bed together.
And I'm not just saying Sunday, I mean like.
Oh, okay.
Like in the past too.
So I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like, no sleepovers, no nothing. For a very long time. For years.
Since we're pausing,
yeah.
What brought that on? Was that like a request of his, like, can we sleep in the same bed, request of hers, or you just saying?
Me being super paranoid, not to trust anyone. For the longest life, even though he treated her well, I still looked at him on, you know, like side-eye, like making sure, like, is that normal? Is this okay? That looks normal. Okay. I wanted to make sure that nothing was happening and that I was missing something, but I was. But he never requested. I'm sorry. Repeat the question then.
Again, she's referring to the situation in terms of it being something, a rule that she's had for years and for the longest time. She's not talking about a 6-month period of time. She's talking about years. To me, that implies this has been occurring for a very, very long time. She's telling us here this rule about her not sleeping in his bedroom has occurred for the longest time. Well, when I hear someone say for the longest time, straight away that tells me we're talking about a really, really long period of time here, like many, many years. And she's contradicting herself now. Having said that she trusted him, she's now talking about her side-eyeing him, meaning that supposedly she was keeping a close eye on him, and her being super paranoid. So they're trying to get her to explain the situation. And now she's coming out with this big long spiel. She's been super paranoid. She's been the super vigilant mum, basically. She's a good mother, according to her story. And then she starts saying he never requested, as she catches herself. I'd love to know what the rest of that sentence was going to be, because she catches herself, she falters, and how does she buy time? She asks them to repeat the question, because she suddenly realises she's screwed up, and she's screwed up big time. So she's gone off script here. She forgot. She's trying to paint the picture of being the perfect mother, and in doing so, she's gone off script and shot herself in the foot, basically. How does she recover from it? She asks them to repeat the question. Basically, oh, I have no idea what I was just talking about just then. Scrap all of what I just said. Repeat the question. Let's do this all over again. Rerun, take 2, delete that last bit of footage. Unfortunately for her, it's all on record.
So I guess when you said like you had a rule, like obviously we know now they've slept in the same bedroom together and everything else. I'm sure you're questioning a lot of things that like you haven't been told or that are going on. The thought process of them sleeping in the same bedroom caused you to say that you had a rule for the longest time where they couldn't.
Yeah.
I have a son. He's a lot younger than her. He's 4. But I guess if I was dating somebody or had somebody over, I would never establish, and this is just me, a rule. He can't sleep in the bed with her, or she's not going to be. It wouldn't even be a thought process for me. So that's why I asked, because I wouldn't think of it even as an option.
Yeah.
So when you say you had a rule, I guess I'm asking what prompted the rule.
Sleepovers before. Yeah. Like, you want to watch movies and eat snacks? Can we do that? I'm like, no. We can all watch movies down here together. We can all sleep down here together. Up until June, together all the time. So we were always. She would sleep in the middle. I would sleep on this side. He would sleep on the other side. It wasn't until June that he got his own bedroom and I sent him upstairs. That's where the requests for sleepovers started.
Okay.
And I kept telling her no. I'm not comfortable with that. But eventually at some point, like we really want to watch. I forgot what movie it was. They really wanted to watch something, and I was really tired. And I said, okay, fine. Go ahead, but this can't happen often. And yeah, I allowed her to go upstairs and sleep with him. But honestly, I think I can count on one hand how many times that's happened, and it hasn't been many times that I've allowed her to have a supper party with him, to be alone in a bed with him. I'm usually around all the time.
So I just had to include that part where he nailed her and basically said that he never would have established a rule like that with his own child, because it never would have even crossed his mind. Because I love when this detective nails her like that. But he re-says the question. He wants to know basically how did it all start? What prompted this? And she's talking about them asking for sleepovers. But on one hand, she's saying the request started in June. But before she says that, she says that they were asking for sleepovers. And she says, no, we can all sleep down here together. Well, that tells me that this occurred before June, because she's made it pretty clear that she threw him out of her room in June. She didn't want him sleeping in her bed anymore from June onwards. So, once again, she has shown us the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that these sleepovers were occurring long before she threw him out of her room. These were occurring when the three of them were sharing that room downstairs, and he would go upstairs and sleep upstairs and take Maddie with him. This has been a long-term thing that she was aware of and that she condoned. She claims, I'm not comfortable with that. And she says this can't happen often. She doesn't say this can't happen ever again. This can't happen often. Meaning that actually she was quite fine with it. She just didn't want it happening every night. To me, often is multiple times in a week or every night. So basically she was allowing it to happen, but she was just limiting how often it could happen, essentially. Do we believe that? Or do we believe that she just basically allowed it to happen anytime because it basically meant she got the bed to herself and got a good night's sleep? And once again, she's reeled it back, and now she's only saying, she says very quietly that she allowed it to happen. And still quietly she says, but I could count on one hand the number of times. So she's reeling it back in now. She's come back from the double digits, the 2 hands, back to 1 hand. So she's trying her hardest to appear to be the responsible parent who knows that this is wrong, who knows it looks wrong, and is limiting the number of times that it can happen, and who really didn't approve of it, but because of their insistence and their whining. Almost like we're talking about a 6 and a 7-year-old kid wanting to build themselves a fort in the living room and sleep under that. And the parent's like, well, I'll let you do that, but not too often. You have to sleep in your own beds. That's the sort of implication that's coming from this, the way I take it. She does not want to take responsibility for her part in what happened.
My understanding was that at some point you told them it was time to go to bed.
Yeah.
Do you recall about what time that was?
Around 11 o'clock.
So that's consistent with getting home at 10:30, having this half-hour discussion and eating your pub sub? Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right. Do they comply with your wishes to go upstairs when you say that at about 11 o'clock?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Again, this is another one of those instances where I'm not actually scrutinising something that Jenn says, but I wanted to point out another brilliant bit of questioning that's occurred here. He has basically made sure that Jenn has admitted that this happened at her say-so. She's been spinning this narrative, trying to put the guilt back on Stephan and Maddie. It's them who ask for the sleepovers. She says it can't happen because she doesn't approve, she knows it's wrong. Can't happen too often, she doesn't like the idea. What does he do? He very carefully puts it back to her original story of her sending them back up to bed. He says, do they comply with your wishes? Making it clear that the narrative here is that Jenn was calling the shots on that Sunday night. This was not, according to her narrative, this was not Stephan and Maddie saying, can we go upstairs for a sleepover? But in actual fact, this was Jenn saying, I don't want to share my room with you. You are going to go upstairs and sleep together. So he's putting it straight back on her. And she said yes, they complied. They did what she asks. So he's basically got her to admit that despite these stories about sleepovers and everything, it was her idea for them to go upstairs and sleep together on the Sunday night, according to her narrative.
And once he moved up to bedroom 4, were there instances where Madeline would sleep alone upstairs with him?
I'm gonna say
I want you to think carefully before you answer, because obviously we've gone through your phone and we've seen all the conversations that you've had with Stephan. So it's clear that that's occurring. So I'm giving you the chance to answer the question.
yeah. I'm just trying to figure out how many times it's happened.
Okay. Why are you allowing that to occur?
I saw Stephan as someone that I completely trusted with my life, my child's life. I thought he had cared for her as a father would. He had been in her life for more than half of it, playing the father role. I thought he cared for her the way I did.
So this, of course, is the derivative use interview. So she's been given the warning that basically she can say things in this interview and they won't be used to prosecute her unless they are things that the detectives have discovered for themselves. But she's also given the warning that this immunity only exists if she is telling the truth in this interview. So with that in mind, they ask her if there were instances of Maddie sleeping alone upstairs with him. And you get a long pause from Jenn. She knows what the answer is that she has to give. She can't lie about this because she's admitted it so many times before. But obviously, now that it's going on the record, it still doesn't look good. And he reminds her that this is, in this interview, she has to tell the truth. And he reminds her that basically they have her phone records so they know what the truth is here. So her response is, I'm trying to figure out how many times. I don't think she was trying to figure out how many times here. I think she was stalling for time. He nailed her ass, and rather than admitting that she didn't want to have to admit it in this particular interview, she just came up with the first excuse that she could land on. I'm trying to figure out how many times. He then asked her why she allowed it to happen. And again, she doesn't want to give an answer. You get the pause, you get a sigh. All the typical Soto strategies that we've seen so often. And then she turns around and says that she completely trusted him. Well, in the last clip, she said she didn't. Now she's saying she completely trusted him. And the irony here, and the thing that makes me quite irate, is she says, I trusted him with my life, with my child's life. Well, you trusted him with your child's life and look what happened. But the irony of it and the insanity. But note too, once again, Jenn's comes first. Thinking about herself first. I trusted him with my life. And then Maddie's an add-on at the end. She didn't even say Maddie's name. She just referred to her as my child. She's basically trying to backpedal as hard as she can here. And she pulls out the father card. He's been in Maddie's life for half her life. she thought he was like a father figure to Maddie. And she thought he cared for her the way she did. Well, I've seen very little evidence that she actually cared for Maddie. So that's a totally redundant statement regardless. She's trying so hard here to backpedal and get out of admitting the fact that she was a bad mother. Admitting the fact that she had no problems with allowing this to happen.
Now, the purpose of you telling or having Maddie sleep with Stephan upstairs is because you told me before that you needed a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
If you needed this kind of sleep previously to when Stephan wasn't there, what would happen?
You mean if Stephan wasn't there and I needed this good night's sleep?
Mm-hmm.
It depends. If I had missed my meds the way I missed them that night and I wasn't feeling, or I was feeling just how I was feeling, I'm not sure if I would have had her sleep, have her sleep with me on the other side of the bed, or if I would have sent her upstairs to the guest room. But she sleeps like a monkey. She sleeps, she rolls, she'll start on one end of the bed and end up on top of me by the end of the night, and she's a gymnast, I guess. But
Have you ever sent her upstairs to sleep?
no, not for any of these reasons.
Have you ever sent her upstairs to sleep by herself?
Alone?
Mm-hmm.
No.
And game, set, and match. He completely nailed her there. So he's asked her, what about the times when Stephan wasn't there? Did you send Maddie upstairs on her own then? And she waffles around. She's not giving a direct answer. She's thinking, doing that very vague Jenn thing that she does. Talking in hypotheticals, not in actual solid answers. So she's giving a hypothetical response of, yeah, maybe I would have done that. Yeah, well, maybe. And he pulls her back in and asks her, have you ever done that? And he has to ask that twice to get her to admit, no, Maddie has never been sent upstairs to sleep on her own for Jenn to get a good night's sleep on the occasions when Stephan wasn't there. And of course it's here that Jenn's lawyer steps in and says, we need to wrap this up. Because he realises that Jenn's suddenly getting in deep and she's getting herself into a spot of bother here. So what's my takeaway from listening to the progression of Jenn's story throughout all these interviews? Well, there's a few things here. First of all, as we go through these interviews, up until the derivative abuse one, where she's a little bit stuck because she knows she has to be truthful, you can see where she's basically escalated her story to try and blame Stephan and Maddie. She introduced this notion of the sleepovers to put it back on them, even though originally she said it was about her needing to get a good night's sleep. So in actual fact, she's given two different stories. On one hand, she claims that this notion of them sleeping upstairs has been their idea from the beginning, and it has nothing to do with her, and that she disapproved of it, but that she allowed them because they just really were insistent. But then the original story that she gives is that it was her idea for them to sleep upstairs so she could get a decent night's sleep. And she says she'll do that on occasion when she needs a good night's sleep. So, which is it, Jen? Is it they instigated this notion of sleeping upstairs together, or you instigated it? Because it seems like she doesn't know which is the better story to give here. So she's given two stories, two versions of the story. She's not a very good liar because she cannot remember what she's previously said. She also, on one hand, is saying that she trusts Stephan with her life, with her daughter's life. And then, on other occasions, she's saying she didn't trust him. She's contradicting herself. So there is definitely a heck of a lot more to this story. I think we can be certain that they were going upstairs together long before she threw him out of her bedroom. This has been a long-term thing. She has, in her own words, said she's had this rule for the longest time. Talking about sleepovers in terms of the longest time. Although we can only apply that if we ignore the other side of it, where she's claiming that it was all her idea for them to go upstairs and sleep out of her way so she could have her room all to herself and sleep peacefully. So I think my takeaway here is that there's probably multiple reasons for them going upstairs and sleeping in the same room together. She's given us two instances when it's occurred, two examples of when it's occurred, and these examples probably have come up on multiple occasions. But for all we know, there could also be other reasons. I think, essentially, at the base of all this, what she's telling us is that it is quite normal for Stephan and Maddie to have gone upstairs and slept together. And that whatever reason was, it was just normal. She accepted it. She allowed it to happen. It was such a normal behaviour that she can come up with multiple instances and multiple reasons for it occurring. Now, from this, I still have a pretty good idea of what I think occurred that night. And I still believe that Jenn either did not see Maddie on the Sunday night, hence she was not the one that sent them upstairs, or that if she did see Maddie, it was only momentarily and perhaps there was some ill words between them because of Jenn not going to Maddie's party. But I'm really interested to see what you guys think about this, to hear your take on it, because I think there's some brilliant thinkers amongst my subscribers, and I know that there's going to be some brilliant comments for me to read after this video drops. I really love reading everyone's comments because of the amount of thinking that goes on and the interaction that's occurring now between my subscribers. You guys are bouncing ideas off each other, and it's just wonderful to see. So, this has brought us to the end. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. That gets these videos out into the algorithm, gets them seen by more and more people. And of course, please do leave a comment, because I really love reading your comments. There are some really great thoughts happening. A lot of people bring up things that hadn't even occurred to me. And it helps me give future direction for other videos, aside from the fact that this just is, it has become a brilliant community, and the things that people are coming up with are just great. So let's keep that up. I will do my best to read everyone's comments. Even if I don't get a chance to respond to your comment, know that I have read it. but I do my best to respond to everyone. So thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.